noticed, and I don't know what you guys think, but sometimes going back to what you were saying, Hannah, is this fear of being judged, right? And so I remember I had a professor at school that used to say, we don't judge. And as a student, you're studying how this is going to be very hard, right? And that's part of what we learn actually in school. And that's how we start. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you guys. So that's why I'm asking about your experience. But
Especially if he's like starting to question things about his life and maybe subconsciously kind of like questioning certain things about his upbringing, or if he wants to be kind of like changing the narrative.
I also think, I mean, I've had a ton of clients and friends even who are maybe impatient with the timeline and they want their partner to ask them to marry them. And they get so upset about it. But the number one thing I've noticed is that they don't talk to their boyfriend about it. They never say like, hey, when are we going to get married? Like they never communicate that.
So the second tip that I would say is to really start small and to then begin to grow gradually. Now, I know for some people, I am not necessarily one of those, but I know for some people, there's absolutely no problem with going out, picking up an outfit that's a bright pink and color blocking it and wearing it out to an event. And if that's you, then go for it. I think that's awesome. I wish I could
cope with those emotions. Identifying triggers is a huge part of it too. And triggers can't always be avoided. You can't really avoid all triggers. So the way to process trauma is also identifying those triggers and then learning how to cope with those, whether it be exposure to those triggers, which can be really difficult, but exposing yourself desensitizes yourself to those triggers.
It's so important, and this is a profession that requires a lot of reflection and understanding. And yeah, if you're interested in human nature and helping people and stuff, you've come to the right place. You've come to the right profession.
They're eating a diet very high in hyper palatable, highly processed foods. And that is tricking their brains and their bodies, messing with their neurotransmitters. And that can be the cause of many, not all, but many mental health
Your attachment style, like I was saying earlier. If you were raised to be anxious or avoidant, and then you get into adulthood and you realize, oh, I have this problem that I'm anxious or avoidant, or maybe both, which I won't get into right now, but you might realize that, and then you actively seek out help to change your attachment style. You can do this by therapy, of course. That is a really great way to do it because your therapist is going to model a healthy attachment to you.
Incredibly difficult and traumatic experiences. Maybe something happened. Maybe you had some adverse childhood experiences growing up. Things like that. And now you're into the survivor story. Maybe you're healing. Maybe you're going to therapy. Maybe something like that. But there's more to your story. There's more to you than just being a survivor, especially if you've gone through trauma.
We'll come into counseling sessions, and it can be really challenging at times, actually. Let me say this in all seriousness. I think it can be really difficult at times to answer questions that appear very simple, like, can you explain to me what any given day feels like when you are experiencing a depressive episode or a dip in mood? And it seems like it could be an easy question on the surface because we're the ones kind of experiencing that, if that's what we're, sharing about or disclosing. But sometimes it can be really difficult. It's very challenging.
When you're dating someone, you can really tell what they value by what they prioritize. And you should do this with yourself too. If you value relationships, then you should prioritize relationships in your life. That means developing deeper friendships. Or if you're trying to prioritize a romantic relationship, sometimes you might have to say no to friends in order to prioritize that romantic relationship. And you can see a lot of this come out in dating where someone say, I really value honest and open communication. But then if they don't do it, then they may not be aware of it. They may have just said that, but you should really try to align yourself with your values.
So as we know from neuroscience, slowing down in terms of our nervous system and slowing our nervous system down and nervous system regulation can really help decrease that stress and anxiety that I was talking about earlier. And when we take those seconds and moments to savor, just like we would with mindfulness or meditation, the research shows that it's a very similar aspect. But there's another little caveat to engaging in hobbies that you're passionate about that is a little different than mindfulness or meditation, and this is called the flow state. It's basically the science of deep enjoyment.
After just a few times at the beach listening to this song, I rewired the cognitive association and replaced it with a whole new one. So what if we did this on purpose more often? Not just with the songs that we already associate memories with, but by intentionally deciding that you want to create a trigger tied to the moment we're in, and then choosing new songs to anchor those experiences. So like
the moment, and this is just basically fully immersing yourself in that present positive experience. So examples would be like really enjoying a beautiful sunset that you're watching, or really enjoying a family dinner.
Misinformation, being misguided, misunderstood, being labeled for things that are just not accurate. And I think some of that stuff still happens today, where we might not necessarily use the word hysteria, but it's like, oh, she's just PMSing, or just so moody, or what's going on with you today, or here she goes, or I don't know what side of you I'm going to get today. I think there's still a limited understanding of what we as women
communication, his like words match what the response should have been, but there were a lot of times where it was like there were weird coincidences. I even looked at her Instagram when it came up in the pods, like, or when he came up, like the scene. I looked at her Instagram and it did have all those like identifying factors that she had mentioned, and I was like, and that's what they talked about in the pods. I thought that was very interesting, but maybe it's a coincidence.
So often don't work because they're limited to one type of mood circuit neuron. There's serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. I call them the three flavors of ice cream. Almost every antidepressant a person tries will bring enhancement to one flavor of ice cream only. So for instance, a person taking Prozac, it'll help the serotonin part of their depression, but not norepinephrine and dopamine parts of their depression. So people so often get partial responses to antidepressants.
Approaches are really helpful for those who have dealt with trauma, chronic stress, anything like that. Also be really helpful when insight alone isn't enough, and when you've noticed that traditional talk therapy hasn't given you that healing that you're looking for.
What I do with my medication follow-up visits, I have the patient fill out a form before they actually meet with me. So it basically asks all the symptoms. The patient is answering these questions before they even see me, what symptoms they're having and how severe are the symptoms. Before I even sit down and begin talking with the patient, I basically have an idea how their symptoms are.
Just like they say that the artist is their worst critic, I believe that athletes are also their worst critic. I remember there were times where I would get out of the pool and be so upset, like just so enraged about it, like not doing a 1/10 of a second of the time that I wanted or something like that. And I would just be emotionally just completely distraught. And I remember people around me being like, that was such a good swim. My coaches would be like, you did great. You kept with pace.
Restorative space where women have come with confidence in their identity, connecting with each other and entering God's love. This is just an example that I put to share that we can heal based also on biblical guidance.
AI, talking to ChatGPT may feel like you're getting reassurance in the moment or you're getting validation, but you're not releasing oxytocin. You're not making a human connection with your brain that needs human connection. Our brains are social organs, and we have these things called mirror neurons where we mirror other people's reactions.
As the conversation begins to kind of unravel, we kind of peel back the layers, I begin to realize that there's this fear here of really what they're talking about. It's just like feeling like they're no longer in control.
They're going to remove, well, let me clarify. They're going to buy you time to make permanent changes. I was going to say they're going to remove the food noise, but what a lot of people don't know is that bariatric surgery and the traditional appetite suppressants like phentermine and the usual that control hunger, that's what they do. They control hunger, but they don't control craving.
That part. And he actually said hey, if I am not supposed to do this, God, just take this cup away from me. So it does seem like he was pretty anxious. And as you say, rightfully so.
The
Right?
brain flourishes off of routine, and that can just help lower anxiety and ease transitions. We all like things to be a little bit predictable, but especially for those where our brain operates a little differently. So I would definitely say having a routines and even visuals, if you can write down what you're expecting from your child, that can be really helpful, or even having them check it off. That releases a little bit of dopamine, and that's helpful. I really think that birth order is a real thing. I am the oldest, and I feel like when you just kind of look up what the oldest child is like, I absolutely 100% live up to that stereotype. I know not everybody does. There's exceptions to that, but it's interesting to look up birth order and to see like what the oldest child oftentimes kind of typically is like, or the middle child, or the baby of the family. And then there's also, it's interesting if there's like a big gap in a family between siblings. It's interesting how that plays out too, with like the birth order and their temperaments and all of that. So the first is listening, is trying to bring awareness to if your body's feeling hungry or full. And I use like a scale. Their doctors have like a pain scale, right? So in the dietitian world, we have like a hunger and fullness scale, like from 1 to 10. And so I have people start just to bring out their awareness, because it's all about practicing listening to the body. Naturally, we do hear, like, generally speaking, women do talk a lot more about like having like this women's intuition, or like, you know, this, they follow their gut more, or make more emotionally based decisions, not necessarily, not in a negative way necessarily, versus men, you know, that might make decisions based off of like facts or something like that. So it'd be interesting to see like what research says about that. So I personally, when I'm talking to clients about journaling, you know, it's like I'm telling them to, Christian clients, I'm telling them to do that, but then also sometimes I might have them read certain parts of the Bible that almost kind of, for me, jump out as journal entries. And for me, it's the book of Psalms. I feel like it's almost like we're getting a sneak peek of like David's journal entries as he's kind of walking through his own experiences, you know? So
Brings her young daughter to a farm every weekend, and they pick up their produce from the farmer. So they know the farmer by name. They talk to him every single Saturday or Sunday, but she gets to pick out all her vegetables for the week and all her fruits, and she takes them and they cook them throughout the week. And then she thinks about that farmer, and she'll be like, oh, this is from farmer so-and-so. And when she's eating it. And I just think, like you're saying, like, it's such a beautiful thing. And to teach children that too, growing up, like being able to appreciate where their food is coming from, connecting at the table with their parents while they're eating it too. Like, it is a beautiful thing.
If I think if families truly want to heal and have better nutrition and more connection to their children and more enriched lives, to push back on activities and to push back on these things, and to set some really, really stringent rules in the home. This is the culture of our home. The culture of our home is we sit down and we eat together in a screen-free environment.
The problem is that this type gets stuck in decision paralysis. The fear becomes so overwhelming that you become detached from your gut feelings, so you're no longer able to tap into your intuition, and you resort to rumination and then have a full-on fear response to uncertainty.
Perfectionism isn't just about having high standards. It's driven by a fear of making even a single mistake, or just disappointing others, or not being enough. That inner dialogue often starts in early life.
the intention behind it is safety, but the tool it uses, self-criticism or maybe even judgment, often backfires. So instead of protecting you, the critic oftentimes
Are a really beautiful way to kind of put yourself first. So boundaries are not selfish, it's self-respect. And I say this a lot to clients, and setting boundaries at first feels very foreign and feels different, but it is so worth it once you begin.
Can, very similar to the Instagram reel that we, you know, watch. Sometimes using humor to personify anxiety really can work. It can kind of reduce shame for us and create this distance between anxiety that we're experiencing and in ourselves. How do your clients like respond to something like that typically?
They enjoy it because it gives them permission not to
feel like they have to deal with it on their own completely. Like if they want to journal about it to get started and then put that away and then bring it into the session and we can continue processing together, that's like the best scenario.
So overthinking helps people avoid making a decision, and possibly a wrong one. So they could avoid making a decision altogether. They could delay it until they don't have to make a decision, or they could just spiral out until someone else makes a decision.